I'm convinced that you become a different, yes, more successful person when you put others first.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast.
Minisode.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. Dustin Harris hanging out once again with you. I appreciate you joining me. We're in the middle of a series called The Principles of Prosperity, and I want to share with you principle number 2 coming up. If you have not done so already, I invite you to go back a couple of weeks and listen to the introduction to the Principles of Prosperity episode. It will lay out the groundwork as to where these principles come from, really what a principle is. Where did Dustin come up with these? Why does he utilize these? It's a great foundation as we guide you through the next several weeks. I want to remind you that these do not go in any particular order. They also can be kind of changed and tweaked and different things as your understanding and wisdom grows in your experience, of course. But today I want to share with you principle number 2. I want to pause here and remind you that we are sponsored today by ANow Software. ANow is a great software program that I can use on my phone, on my tablet, on my desktop. You name it, it's everywhere I go. It's ANow.com, ANow.com. All right, folks, principle number 1 was to pay yourself first. I take 10% out immediately, and I put that 10% in a fund that will be for a rainy day, if you will, a savings investment. The next 10% I like to, and by the way, this doesn't have to be necessarily 10%. I would highly recommend, and I don't think there's any principle of truth in the 1-0 number, but in general, when you take 10% of your income, your gross, and you look for opportunities to bless the lives of others, I don't know why. I can't explain it, but I can tell you there is something to it. How's that for science? I've been living this principle from the time I was a kid. Now, over the years, the direction that charity has gone to has changed, but I'm convinced that this is a principle of truth. I'm convinced that you become a different, yes, more successful person when you put others first. And I think that's what this principle is based on. As I said in the last episode, I'll repeat here. This is not a principle that I can point to and tell you necessarily where it came from. It is a principle of the universe that I think has always existed and I think will always exist no matter time, no matter circumstance. And the nice thing about the principle is it's set and set up, if you will, in the form of percentages. I love percentages because it doesn't matter how little or how much you make, they remain the same. So you can't say, well, I make too little to utilize this principle, because understandably, when you make too little, right, you're making less, thus you're paying less. But the idea of giving first, of finding opportunity to share with others, is a principle of truth. I want to pause here and remind you that we are sponsored by ANow Software. ANow has been a software that I've been actually using longer than I thought. I went back and was pulling up old reports for a purpose here a couple of weeks ago and was kind of shocked about how long I've been using ANow. It just really feels like it's always been part of my process because it is so amazing, and the things that it does to allow me to be more successful is incredible. Well, how does it do that? Folks, it keeps track of numbers. We're talking about the principles of prosperity. ANow Software is part of those principles because you have to know your numbers. You have to know where you're at in order to make decisions that will do what you need to do. That's principles of truth, and ANow will help you to live those more fully. ANow.com, and if you use the coupon code podcast30, you get 30% off your first 3 months. That's ANow.com, podcast30. Welcome back to the program, everybody. Dustin Harris hanging out with you, and we're working through the principles of prosperity. Folks, these will bless your lives. They really will. One of them is to give 10% to charity. Now, I will freely admit, I have not always lived this principle 100%. There are ebbs and flows in my life. I don't always give 10% to charity. Sometimes I give 6% to charity. Sometimes I give 14% to charity. I try to hover around the 10%. Could I live this more fully? Absolutely. Could I actually take 10%, set it aside, put it in cash and stick it in an envelope and say I've got 1 month to share this prosperity with others? Probably. I don't do that. I probably should do that. But in general, I try to live this principle because I know it works. Now, this is where you're just going to have to trust me, because this is one of those principles that if I actually sat down and tried to quantify the reason why it works, how does taking 10%, now the first principle is easy, right? The first principle is pay yourself first. I can lay out for you the science behind taking 10% out of your gross, putting it aside, and making that money work for you. That is understandable to me, because I'm taking 10%, and I let that add up over time, and an opportunity to buy an Airbnb presents itself, and I utilize that money to do that, and all of a sudden I'm now cash flowing at $2,000 a month, more than what I was before. That science works. Those numbers work, right? That's appraisal for you, right? You make the adjustment and it makes sense. This next one, not so much. This next one, I can't explain it other than to say it works. And if you don't trust me, if you don't believe it, I would encourage you to live it. Take 1 month, take 3 months, take whatever it will take to convince you, and live the principle. Number 2, pay 10% to charity second. I'm telling you, folks, it changes you. When you drive past that guy that's standing out on the street at Walmart, and you ask yourself, should I, should not give? And by the way, there's lots of answers to that question, right? There are good arguments on either side whether you should roll down your window and hand out that $5 bill. But the ability to be able to make that choice changes you. The ability to be able to make that decision changes you. And when you're putting aside 10% for charity, it changes the way you look at life. And when your life aspect or outlook changes, it also changes your success. Speaking of success and becoming better, hope you'll consider joining us at the Dream Team. We are meeting across the country, and yes, we're starting with the vaccine coming out. We're starting to meet more often. It's so fun and so good to be back together again. Check it out. Go to my website, theappraisercoach.com/memberships. One more time, it's theappraisercoach.com/memberships.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.